The day Ethan married me, he threw the grandest wedding the entire Beijing circle had ever seen. During the vows, he tightly held my hand, tears of joy streaming down his face, like a child. Choking with emotion, he said, "Ethan will never let Amelia down in this life." After 2 years of a close-knit marriage, he begged me to have a child for him. Seeing the hope in his eyes, I agreed. But the boy who once seemed unable to live without me couldn't resist loneliness during my pregnancy. He cheated on me, betraying his vows. At 6 months pregnant, I attended a tea party hosted by the wives of Beijing's elite. Ethan carefully took my hand and settled me next to Emma, whom he trusted most. In the midst of the women's watching and murmurs, he still looked at me with deep affection, not changing his expression as he kneeled to adjust my floating skirt. "Ethan's wife is so lucky. They've been married for almost 3 years, and Mr. Ethan still cherishes her like this. Their love is well known for being deep, even if the diamond on her ring changes, their love will never change." Ethan smiled, lightly patting the left hand that he'd been holding throughout the gathering, saying to everyone, "Ladies, please stop teasing me. I'll rely on you all to take care of Amelia this afternoon. I'll be waiting at the cafe downstairs. I'll come to pick up Amelia when the party's over." The wedding ring on my hand, which had shone for more than 2 years, still gleamed brightly. Before leaving, Ethan paid for the afternoon tea, which led to another round of envious comments. I smiled quietly, accepting the flattery. Not long after, my phone pinged with a message from Ethan. Emma, who was sitting next to me, saw it and laughed, saying, "Ethan just left, and he's still not at ease. He's already texting you." I didn't respond, instead glancing at the message, my fingers betraying a slight flutter. The text was from Ethan's driver. "Madam, sir has asked me to take him to Miss Sophia's." Still maintaining my faint smile, I flipped my phone over on the table and let Emma help me walk to the floor-to-ceiling window. Emma had just gotten married herself, and her relationship with her husband was also sweet. She looked with admiration at Ethan's car parked downstairs, then asked me, "Do you think my husband and I could have a love like yours, one that never fades?" I watched as Ethan hurried to get into his car. The driver sped off, heading away from the cafe. Turning my back to the crowd, I concealed my smile. I touched the worn edges of my wedding ring and replied, "Nothing lasts forever." The boy who once seemed unable to live without me had changed. He still couldn't resist loneliness and cheated during my pregnancy. I know how much Ethan loves me. Our families have been close for generations, and he and I grew up together, childhood sweethearts. Since I became aware of the world, everything he did was centered around me. When we were kids, I loved the tiramisu from a shop in the north of the city, so he spent a lot of money bringing in the best pastry chef from there. In middle school, when our family moved to Shanghai, this prince, raised in luxury, followed me to live alone just to accompany me to school, so we could attend the same school. In college, he didn't hesitate to reject an offer from Switzerland and came to the Netherlands to study with me. I once told him with a tinge of concern that he didn't have to always stay by my side, that I would remember how good he was to me. At that time, he said, "Amelia, you don't need to worry about me. You just walk ahead, be yourself, live a carefree and brilliant life, and I will always be behind you. That's my mission." It was Christmas, and the sky was filled with brilliant fireworks. I looked at the boy whose eyes were full of me and silently made a wish: Amelia and Ethan, never part, growing old together. It was that day I decided to stop and build a happy home with Ethan. On the day I accepted his proposal, he was so excited that he couldn't sleep all night. He ran around the entire city of Shanghai, and on every billboard, it said, "Ethan is going to marry his beloved Amelia." Because of this, Ethan was teased by his friends in the Beijing circle, the wealthy young men. They all said that Ethan, who fell in love with me, was like a 3-year-old child. They even joked that I, Amelia, was Ethan's heartbeat. When I married Ethan and settled in Beijing, my father strongly opposed it. Although he liked Ethan as a son-in-law, he didn't want me to move so far away. At that time, I firmly told my parents, "I am Ethan's destiny. He can't live without me. I believe he will never let me down." Looking back, it seems laughable now. Who in this world cannot live without someone else? How could Ethan possibly truly need only me? The afternoon tea gathering lasted 3 hours. When it ended, before I could call Ethan, he appeared right on time at the door of the lobby. He rushed toward me as if I were a treasure, immediately protecting my waist and, as always, taking my left hand with his right, our wedding rings clinking together. Others praised our unbreakable love, but all I could smell was the sterile scent of a hospital and cheap perfume. Once the car started, the driver kept avoiding my gaze in the rearview mirror. Ethan pulled out the coffee he had packed for me, the logo on the bag clearly showing the cafe downstairs. He lifted the cup lid and gently blew on the coffee for me. You wanted coffee a while ago, right? It's still your favorite flavor. Just bear with it for the baby, take a sip, I'll drink the rest. Before I got pregnant, my favorite was the cappuccino from this cafe, half sweet. In the early days of my pregnancy, I often craved coffee in the middle of the night. Ethan would tirelessly drive here late at night to bring me a cappuccino, just so I could smell its rich fragrance and fall asleep. Those days, I might have been the most difficult person for Ethan. I couldn't control my emotions and felt resentful when I had to give up everything I loved for the sake of the baby in my belly. I wasn't happy, and Ethan suffered right alongside me. After calming down, I would apologize to Ethan, but he would grip my hand tightly, tears in his eyes. If I had known that having a child would make you so miserable, I wouldn't have let you get pregnant. Now that I think about it, it seems like I haven't thrown tantrums at Ethan in a long time. When did that change? It seems to have been after I found out about Miss Sophia. A bitter smile curled on my lips. Now, Ethan willingly buys me cappuccinos, but is it out of concern for my pregnancy, or is it because he's trying to cover up what he did with Miss Sophia behind my back? I closed my eyes, which had started to burn, and took a deep sniff of the coffee. But I could no longer smell the rich, comforting aroma I once relied on. All I could smell was the foreign, sharp perfume scent on Ethan, one that didn't belong to me. I couldn't hold back and gagged. Ethan gently patted my back, thinking it was just a normal pregnancy reaction, and instructed the driver to stop the car. My stomach churned with acidity as I rubbed my aching heart, the first time I clearly felt that the stomach is an emotional organ. Tears fell from my eyes, and I reddened with embarrassment, calmly saying, "Ethan, I feel sick." He looked at me with concern. "Amelia, can you no longer even tolerate your favorite cappuccino?" I forced a smile and shook my head. "It's the smell on you that makes me feel sick." Ethan froze, his body trembling as he met my gaze. In a dry voice, he asked, "What? What smell do I have on me?" What Ethan didn't know was that I had already met Sophia behind his back. Sophia is a graduate student from the nearby university, where Ethan's company is located. She possesses the youthful energy and innocent romanticism that a young woman should have, along with a rationality different from mine. She has plenty of time to accompany Ethan during my pregnancy. But what she doesn't have is the unique perspective and breadth of mind that comes from growing up in a wealthy circle like mine. The first time I met Sophia, she was wearing a luxury brand suit that didn't suit her. The brand new fabric indicated that she had purchased it just to meet me, the day before. But aside from the suit, her simplicity was evident, showing how much effort she had put in. I sat across from her, and she trembled slightly the whole time. I took off my wedding ring and placed it between us. I asked her if she knew Ethan was married. She turned pale and, after a long silence, shook her head, still stubbornly denying it. I smiled but didn't expose her. Before I got pregnant, I would often visit Ethan's company after finishing my design drafts. Everyone at the company knew how Ethan, who was ruthless in business, would kneel down to put on shoes for me. Even though Sophia had just joined the company, there was no way she didn't know about me. I didn't make things difficult for her. Instead, I talked to her about many things unrelated to Ethan. I talked about my excellent grades during my time in the Netherlands, and how I successfully made deals through my own efforts. I told her that I was good enough to never be the kind of woman who would destroy someone's family. After I said that, I grabbed my bag and turned to get into the car that Ethan had sent to pick me up. He didn't understand, gently stroking my hair. Are you meeting with an old friend? In a place where Ethan couldn't see, I saved the audio of my conversation with Sophia. It was to persuade someone to turn back from the wrong path. Ethan, focused on the steering wheel, said, "My Amelia is so kind." I looked at him, his expression strangely unfamiliar. "But Ethan, you no longer have the chance to realize your mistake with me. Once I've made my preparations to walk away, there will be no room for you in my world." Because of the plans I had hidden deep inside, I still didn't confront Ethan. I forced myself to smile and shifted the blame to the driver. Gage, I must have mistaken the smell. It was probably Gage's disinfectant. He told me recently that his uncle was at the hospital for a checkup. Gage gripped the steering wheel tightly. I pretended not to see the panicked look exchanged between him and Ethan in the rearview mirror. Gage quickly responded, "Yes, recently after work, I've been going to the hospital to accompany him. If Madam feels uncomfortable with the smell, I'll change into a different set of clothes next time." I smiled dismissively and turned to joke with Ethan, "Look at me, my pregnancy's making me paranoid." But Ethan didn't laugh. He pulled me into his arms tightly, as if afraid of losing something, holding me so hard that it felt like he was trying to merge me with his body. "Amelia, don't leave me. We made a vow to hold hands and grow old together." I rested my chin on his shoulder and softly muttered, But the first to break that vow was you." The Dutch school sent me an invitation, announcing that a piece of jewelry I designed would be featured in their upcoming exhibition. When Ethan found out, he instinctively urged me not to travel while pregnant. I looked at him coldly and said, "Being a designer is my lifelong dream. Do you want to use the baby to interfere with my career?" Ethan stood frozen, but after a moment, he rushed to my side and squatted down anxiously. "I'm sorry, Amelia. I'm just worried about your health. I didn't mean to hold you back." His anxious tone showed how much he cared. His concern for me is real, and his desire not to restrain me is also genuine, but his subconscious attempt to stop me is just as true. Perhaps the young man who once loved me deeply didn't even know when he slowly disappeared. To make it up to me, after attending the school's event, Ethan took me on a half-month trip around the Netherlands. He didn't say a single word against me. I ate whatever I wanted, went wherever I wanted, just as he once said I only needed to move forward and be myself, and he would always be behind me. But when I walked down the streets of a foreign country and saw a little boy playing with bubbles, I turned to share the moment with Ethan. He was still behind me, but he no longer looked at me. He had his head down, typing on his phone, contacting Sophia, who was miles away. I withdrew my smile, didn't linger, and turned to continue walking, never looking back at Ethan again. We had booked a villa in the countryside for a whole month. Back when I was in college, Ethan and I often chose this place for our dates. The view from here had the best night sky in the world. Looking up, countless stars twinkled, and meteors frequently streaked across the sky. Ethan once pointed to the brightest star and told me, "Amelia, as long as you want, I'll pick the brightest star for you." At the time, I always laughed and said Ethan was childish, but deep inside, I felt immense joy. Everyone knew that Ethan couldn't live without me. But what about me? I had long become dependent on him. What would I do without him? I had never dared to think about this question. The evening breeze, chilly, swept through my collar. I turned and saw Ethan a little way off, his phone turned away from me, typing. Calmly, I tucked my skirt tighter. The constant ping of text notifications sounded from Ethan's phone. As we spent more time in the Netherlands, the frequency of these alerts increased. But suddenly, one day, I no longer heard them. Ethan had set his phone to silent. Ethan, who had promised to enjoy the night view with me, was now rapidly replying to messages, his fingers flying across the screen. Ethan. I wanted to ask him, "Are you really that busy?" He looked up at me, but before I could ask, his phone rang, interrupting. Ethan looked at the caller ID, and I caught the tightening of his hands. He hesitated for a moment, then casually looked at me and said, "It's a call from the company, there might be something urgent." "I'll take it." I nodded in silence. In the past, when he was by my side, he never took business calls. But now, Ethan deliberately answered the phone in front of me, calmly responding with, If I hadn't already received a call from Sophia, I might have been fooled by Ethan's professional demeanor. After we had finalized our travel plans in the Netherlands, I met Sophia for the second time. She had arranged it. Compared to our first meeting, she seemed like a completely different person. She wore high-end jewelry, and a diamond-encrusted watch adorned her wrist. She casually boasted that these things were gifts from Ethan. I had to admit, a person's appearance is affected by what they wear. Sophia, dressed in wealth, now had a certain charm. She was no longer trembling with nervousness. She no longer denied the uncomfortable truths, and even confidently threatened me. Have you heard the saying? If someone falls in love with a second person, it only means the first person wasn't the right one. Miss Amelia, you're a dignified person. Since you know the reality, why bother holding on to Ethan? Why not save face for yourself? She began to attack me. I simply sipped my tea and, in front of her, sent Ethan a voice message. I want to go back to that villa in the Netherlands to watch the stars. Could you book a month's stay for us? Sophia listened to Ethan's reply, her face turning red with anger. All right, Amelia wants to stay as long as she wants. I'll stay with you. Before Sophia could launch into another round of meaningless verbal attacks, I stood up to end the argument. Before leaving, I only said one thing to her, Miss Sophia, do you know that you're unknowingly imitating my image? Perhaps this sentence pricked her vanity. She began desperately contacting Ethan, who was by my side. On the 20th day of our stay in the Netherlands, she called me, hysterically crying. Her tears mirrored the expression Ethan wore while answering the phone. I calmly listened to her sobs. The difference was that after hearing something on the other end, Ethan suddenly furrowed his brows. He looked away from me, hurriedly telling the person on the phone, I understand. After hanging up, he looked at me, his eyes reddening. His dark eyes, like stars, trembled violently, betraying his confusion. I pretended not to notice, nonchalantly continuing my previous words, Ethan, the brightest star doesn't shine anymore. Could you take it down for me? I want to see how it got broken. But Ethan, who was now in a state of panic, had no time for my absurd words. He began packing his things, trembling as he said, Amelia, there's an issue with the company. I need to go back. I said nothing, quietly watching him toss clothes into the suitcase. Before leaving, he embraced me and apologized, Amelia, I'm sorry. I'll come back to be with you once I handle the company matters. I looked at him, nodded slowly, then turned back to the sky, continuing to watch the endless stars. Even when Ethan closed the door behind him, pulling his suitcase, I didn't look back. I must have been right this time, the issue must be really serious. If not, how could the boy who once treasured me so much fail to notice the strange emotions I have now? The phone screen flashed, and a text from the driver appeared, Ma'am, Miss Sophia, she's pregnant. Snap! I don't know when my eyes welled up, but the tears quietly dripped onto the screen. I, alone, guarded the child in my womb and returned to my home country. I silently packed up the remnants of my life with Ethan, separating the things that belonged to me from his. I hid everything from my family and friends, bearing the pain of betrayal on my own. The love Ethan had once sworn to show me now turned into a sharp knife, stabbing directly into my heart. Since the moment I became pregnant, Ethan had been the one to organize and pack all of my clothes. Now, packing up alone with my belly dragging behind felt especially difficult both physically and emotionally. Everything was harder, my movements, my breathing. Since I learned about Sophia's existence, the emotions I had suppressed could no longer stay calm. They surged and roared, as if they were going to completely consume me. The child inside me seemed to sense my pain, and my belly started to ache. I leaned against my stomach and slowly collapsed to the ground, biting my lip to keep the tears from welling up further. The call from my father was the last straw that broke me. Gage, the driver, had been secretly placed by my father next to Ethan when I first moved to Beijing. I'm sure Gage had already told my parents about Sophia. When I answered the call, no words were spoken on the other end. Only heavy, frustrated breathing filled the silence. A wave of unjust sorrow surged through me. I thought back to when I had insisted on coming to Beijing with Ethan despite my father's strong objections. What's the big deal about marrying far away? It's just a flight away. My father had furrowed his brow and said, I'll show you what it means to marry far away. If Ethan makes you suffer, within 2 hours, if I don't slap him, that's what I call marrying far away. Back then, I had laughed at my father's words and happily looked at Ethan, who was cutting fruit for me. I said, Dad, let's make a bet. Ethan definitely loves me more than you do, and he wouldn't want me to suffer. How much I trusted Ethan back then, I now felt so ashamed to face my father. He might scold me harshly, asking why I didn't listen to him. He might casually say I lost the bet and comfort me. But he said nothing, only quietly said, We'll come to pick you up. That was the first time I cried aloud after learning of Ethan's betrayal, and it was just because of those 5 words from my father. On the 3rd night after I returned, Ethan came home. When he walked in, tired and with a scruffy face, and saw half of our things packed up and me sitting on the floor, tears dried on my face, he was struck like a thunderclap. I could tell he was trying to stay calm, trying to deceive himself as he quietly asked me, Amelia, what happened? I couldn't help but laugh at him. At this point, he was still pretending. Ethan, startled by my laugh, rushed toward me. He smelled so unfamiliar. He trembled as he held me tightly. Amelia, don't look at me like that. What? What happened? At that moment, all I felt was unfamiliarity toward him. I broke free from his embrace and asked calmly, when did you become someone who dares to do something but can't take responsibility for it? Ethan knelt in front of me, gripping my hand so hard it hurt. Amelia, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I just sympathized with Sophia. She worked so hard to come to Beijing, but her mother died giving birth to her, and her father has bone cancer and is in the hospital. She's all alone, burdened with huge medical bills. I slapped Ethan across the face, the force making his head tilt. I interrupted him, my tone cold and biting. What does her background have to do with me? In nearly 30 years with Ethan, I had never once raised my hand, not even a harsh word. He stood frozen, his eyes filled with tears. Was it from grievance or guilt? I shook off his hand as he tried to support me and walked toward the study. In contrast to his painful gasps, I was calm, as though nothing had happened. Is it because I haven't been fighting for my career since I got pregnant that you think I'm a fool? A woman's intuition is always timely and accurate. I had noticed her the very first time I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, seeing Sophia get out of the car, attempting to help Ethan, who was stumbling and drunk. I remembered her. I took off my diamond ring and looked at the tiny crack in it under the light from the study, but back then, I didn't think much of Sophia because you promised me that you would never betray me. As I mentioned those words, I let out a mocking laugh. At that moment, Ethan finally realized how terribly wrong he had been. He kneeled in front of me with a thud, slapping himself repeatedly. He cried, begging for my forgiveness, carefully taking my hand. Amelia, hit me if you want. You can slap me, kick me, whatever you want. Please, forgive me. I'll cut ties with Sophia completely. I lowered my eyes and shook my head. Do you remember that I once advised someone to turn back from the wrong path? That person was Sophia. Ethan frowned, clearly not expecting this. He didn't realize that Sophia and I had already met a long time ago. I gave her a chance to keep her dignity, but she didn't cherish it, making one mistake after another. She even came to my face, showing off, but I just treated her as a joke. Ethan trembled as he apologized repeatedly. Amelia, I'm so sorry. I never imagined she would dare to directly harass you. I'll make her apologize to you. Please, forgive me. I pulled my hand away and handed him the diamond ring. Ethan, here, you don't get a second chance to make a mistake. She even came to my face, showing off, but I just treated her as a joke. Ethan trembled as he apologized repeatedly. Amelia, I'm so sorry. I never imagined she would. I let go without hesitation, letting the ring fall to the floor and roll under the corner of the sofa. Amelia, don't do this, I can't live without you. It's my fault, it's my fault. Ethan clumsily retrieved the ring from under the sofa and crawled to my side on his knees. I opened the drawer, took out the divorce agreement I had already prepared from my pile of design drafts. We represent the dignity of two families, let's do this properly. Ethan, sign it. Ethan, in disbelief, tore up the agreement, crying and begging me. I had once thought that when this moment arrived, I would feel sad, perhaps even soften for him. But now, I just felt calm, with a hint of regret for the past version of myself. I coldly watched Ethan tear up the agreement and asked, "Where have you arranged for Sophia to go?" He suddenly lost all energy, no longer daring to beg me. "I sent her to America." I scoffed and closed my eyes. "If I hadn't exposed it today, how long would you have kept this from me? Would you have hidden it until she gave birth to the child?" "Ethan, I'm truly disappointed in you." Ethan, no longer having any face to stop me, followed behind me as I continued packing. When I couldn't reach something on a high shelf, he unwillingly helped me take it down, then softly called my name, "Amelia. Amelia." In the end, I zipped up my suitcase and sat on the sofa, waiting. Ethan quietly knelt in front of me, his eyes desperately fixed on me. I still said to him, calmly, "Ethan, let's get a divorce." "Amelia, kill me if you must." Ethan shook his head in agony, weakly saying, "I can't live without you." Tears surged again, and he tried to suppress his sobs. This sight reminded me so much of our wedding day, when he choked up, thankful that he had finally married me. Back then, his firm words were, "Ethan will never fail Amelia in this lifetime." And now, after everything he had done to hurt me, he still hoped for my forgiveness. I looked into Ethan's deep, almond-shaped eyes. "People say that those who betray true love must swallow 1,000 needles. Ethan, I don't need you to do any of this. I just want to ask, where has the boy who once loved me deeply gone?" Ethan leaned closer, trying to elicit a moment of pity from me. "Amelia, I'm still here. I've always loved you." I silently shook my head in denial. It was because I had seen Ethan love me so deeply that, when that love transformed, I could feel it most clearly. Ethan calmed down and, regaining his composure, began trying every possible way to keep me. "Amelia, our child is about to be born. Please forgive me this once, for the sake of our child, give us a complete family. I swear I'll never make the same mistake again, okay?" I suddenly frowned, recoiling from his hand as he tried to touch me. "Are you trying to trap me with the child?" My stomach churned again, this time solely because of the man in front of me. "When you begged me to have a child, how did you promise that the child wouldn't trap me in my life?" "That's right, you've broken your vows from the wedding, so how could I believe these trivial promises?" "Ethan, you truly disgust me." The doorbell rang just in time, interrupting Ethan, who still wanted to argue. He told me to sit and stay calm as he turned to answer the door. Before he could even see who it was, he received a solid punch to the face. Ethan was knocked to the ground, and when he saw that it was my parents from Shanghai who had come, his expression instantly deflated. He knew there was no way to save himself now. He didn't dare fight back, taking every punch from my father, who was landing blows with force. "Ethan, you little brat from the Ethan family, I'll remember you. My daughter Amelia has suffered enough at your hands. I'll make sure to make your entire family pay for this." If my mother hadn't supported me to stand beside them, my father probably would have beaten Ethan into a state where he couldn't move. I pulled out a new divorce agreement and a USB drive, placing them next to the battered Ethan. "This USB contains all the evidence of your affairs, how much you've bought for Sophia, how many times you've slept with her behind my back. Oh, and you thought your first time with Sophia was because her family tried to trap you, but you ended up mistakenly entering her room? The truth is, everything was planned by the Sophia you sympathized with. I have proof of her drugging you. If you still can't let her go, I, Amelia, have the ability to make sure she rots in prison." I decisively left that home, without any hesitation or regret. Since the day Ethan's eyes began to change when he looked at me, I started secretly contacting lawyers to fight for my shares and take full custody of the child. I stood by, watching indifferently as Ethan, with no defenses, kept Sophia by his side, stepping deeper and deeper into the gentle trap she had set for him. From the beginning, I stayed clear-headed. If even these basic boundaries required me to guard Ethan, then this relationship would only become an obstacle to my own progress. The life I want to live, full of brilliance, cannot be trapped by an indecisive man. Now, everything that happened to Ethan is simply the result of his own actions. As for the boy who once swore to love me for a lifetime, I consider him as someone killed by time, along with the version of me that once depended on him so much. Perhaps the only thing in this world that will never change is my parents' love for me. They brought me back to Shanghai and publicly announced my divorce from Ethan. While people were shocked by the news, they kept speculating about the reasons behind the breakdown of our relationship. I didn't hide the truth about Ethan's infidelity. I returned to my battlefield while carrying a 7-month-old child and released a new design. In the unbreakable diamond, there were countless cracks. I named it Natural Degradation to commemorate the boy who once promised to pluck stars from the sky for me. Ethan publicly admitted his mistakes. His company, which he had spent over a decade building, saw its stock prices plummet overnight. He continued to try to contact me, no longer expecting my forgiveness. He said he wanted to make it up to me. I didn't pay any more attention to him or Sophia. I only knew that Ethan was using all his connections to find a top lawyer to sue Sophia. The next time I saw Sophia, she rushed at me like a madwoman but was stopped by the bodyguard my father had arranged for me. She yelled the nastiest things at me, blaming me for her misfortune. "Amelia, may you never live well. It's you, it must be you who forced Ethan to make us lose our child. Why does Ethan still love you? Why can you have everything in life that I can never reach? Why couldn't I even protect my only father, who died of cancer yesterday?" Sobi. At first, I just wanted Ethan to help save my dad. Sophia, who once looked so proud and defiant in front of me, had now become a broken soul. She was no longer the ambitious woman I saw when I first met her at Ethan's company. She dragged her broken body and sobbed bitterly in front of me, blaming Ethan, blaming the unfairness of life. Sophia had provoked me more than once. She said that without Ethan's love, I was nothing. But all she ever saw was Ethan by my side, never noticing the piano I had played since I was a child or the nights I stayed up designing jewelry. I didn't care to hit or insult her because she wasn't even on the same level as me. I looked down at the accomplice who had killed the boy I once loved, my voice tinged with mockery. "I warned you. You chose to humiliate yourself by provoking me. Even if you really seduced Ethan, I could destroy you on my own. Sophia, you're pathetic." Ethan showed no mercy, suing Sophia and getting her sent to jail. A former employee from his company, who had added me on WeChat, messaged me saying that after the divorce, Ethan had become a shell of a man who only focused on work. His temper had gotten worse, and no one had seen him smile again. I didn't reply, just reading it like passing clouds, then deleting the message and the contact. When people in the industry mentioned me to Ethan, his eyes would instantly turn red, and he would quietly drown his sorrows in alcohol. After drinking, he often cried in front of others, confessing his sins and expressing how sorry he was for me. He had developed a drinking problem, landing in the hospital several times. Some friends, moved by his misery, contacted me, urging me to give him another chance. I didn't respond, gradually distancing myself from those friends. They would never understand the betrayal and pain I had gone through. And even back on the streets in the Netherlands, I had already turned my back on Ethan. Too bad he had his head down at that time, and would never know that I, too, had once softened my heart for him. After my father brought me home, he made good on his word by targeting Ethan's family business and taking many of their major deals. Ethan, who had no interest in his company, was powerless to fight back. The Ethan family's business in China plummeted. Ethan's parents also visited several times. Thinking of the elderly couple who had always treated me like their precious daughter, I still met with them. They looked at my 9-month pregnancy with only regret in their eyes. It's Ethan's fault. He didn't cherish you properly. It's our Ethan family's bad luck. Even if you've cut ties with Ethan, remember us. We truly treated you like a daughter. We've decided to move to Europe. Ethan won't bother you anymore after the child is born. If you need anything, just come to us. They looked at me with deep affection and reluctance. I smiled and promised them. When I saw them off, my father, still angry, refused to give Ethan's father a friendly face. Ethan's father, knowing he had no reason to be angry, patted my father's shoulder lightly and sighed heavily. This is our Ethan family's fault. Whatever you need, just let us know. My father couldn't help himself, looking at the old friend he's known his whole life. Humph, I'll let the Ethan family go this time, for your old face, but your son Alexander, in my lifetime, I'll beat him every time I cross paths with him. Ethan's father quickly agreed, yes, he deserves it, he really does. When my pregnancy reached full term, and the day I entered the delivery room arrived, Ethan and his parents had rushed back from Europe. After I gave birth, my mother told me what had happened. When Ethan arrived outside the operating room, without saying a word, he tried to rush in to see me. The nurse told him that the surgery had already begun, and he couldn't see the pregnant woman. It was only then that he calmed down, lowering his head as he faced my father. Dad. Alexander, even if you beat me into the operating room today, I still want to see Amelia just once. At that moment, the two men I cared about most in this world were no longer concerned with anything more important than life and death. Thankfully, over the past year, I had protected both myself and the child very well. The birth went smoothly, and we had a healthy baby boy. When they wheeled me out of the operating room, Ethan, who had been pacing for who knows how long, rushed over immediately and softly asked me, Amelia, does it hurt? Though only a few months had passed, he looked much more haggard. Even though his suit was neatly pressed, it couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes or his gaunt, sickly appearance. But that no longer mattered to me. Whether or not he could survive without me, I no longer cared. I avoided his gaze, instead looking at my parents and Ethan's elderly family members. My father, who had always been so solemn, had tears in his eyes, his voice trembling. The child looks exactly like you when you were born. In the following days, Ethan continued to try to see me. I stopped my father, who had tried to solve everything with violence, and agreed to meet with Ethan once more. When he opened the hospital door, it was as if the world had gone silent. We looked at each other wordlessly, both knowing that there was no future for us. He placed a card on the table, avoiding my eyes. This is my responsibility as a father. I won't fight you for custody. I only ask that you let me see him sometimes. I smiled faintly and shook my head. Even if you wanted to fight, you wouldn't stand a chance. I didn't divorce you the moment I found out about your affair because I was gathering evidence, preparing a future for myself and the child. When the child is old enough, I will tell him everything. Whether or not he forgives you will be a matter between you and him. Ethan's fingers trembled as he looked down and bitterly laughed. Amelia, how could I bear to fight you? For a moment, he seemed to merge with the boy I remembered, the one who would lower his head when he had made a mistake. Amelia, I know you don't want to see me again. But can you allow me to make it up to you in a place where you can't see? As the past and the present separated, I looked into Ethan's eyes, void of any emotion. Ethan, the best way for you to make up for it is to stop disturbing my life. Don't show up in my next life, either. Go away. I couldn't bear to let him kill the boy I once remembered. I named my son Damien. In this long, ever-changing life, all I hope for him is to always be safe and happy. When I returned to the Netherlands with Damien, it was for the awards ceremony for my natural degradation design, which I had created 4 years ago. Walking the familiar yet strange streets of a foreign country, with snow falling on Christmas Day, I once again thought of the boy who would always walk behind me. Mom, hurry up. The innocent voice of my child pulled me out of my memories. He was blowing bubbles and hopping along, inviting me to walk ahead with him. As the sweet and painful memories gradually blurred, all I felt was gratitude. I was grateful that I wasn't the female lead in some idle drama, giving up everything for love. I still had my beloved career, my unwavering principles, and the me who would always cherish myself. I bought the mountain villa I had always dreamed of, claiming the starry sky above as my own for this lifetime. When I looked up at the sky, I could no longer remember where the star that no longer shines had once been. But in the galaxy, there would always be the brightest star. Damien pointed at that star and said to me, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll pick that brightest star for you."